Okay, so if you've read the title, you probably think heavy spoilers fell off, but don't click away. Let me explain. For the last couple of years, I think Hollywood and, well, society in general has been going through a weird time. If you've been keeping up to date with the release of Snow White, then you'll know it's been hit with controversy after controversy. This has now hit a point where they can't even hold red carpet interviews for the film. This is a Snow White live action remake. Shouldn't be controversial. This is something that should be the most milquetoast movie of all time. However, I think this film's gonna change Hollywood forever. It's the end of the world. I will discuss why though, and throughout this video, I kind of want to talk about how it is we got here, and also how I think it's going to change the entire industry. It's the heavy spoilers show though, so we're starting off with the ending first. So I think if this film bombs, which it looks like it's going to, then Hollywood's going to start implementing the strictest social media contracts that we've ever seen ever. I think every actor will be put through intense media training when they're pushed to the forefront of a project like this. Never before have we had a time where you can just instantly send your thoughts out to millions and millions of people. Hell, even this video, based off the subject alone, I know it's going to get people unsubscribing. So far, I've managed to go over 1,000 videos without wading into the culture war, but it's getting to that point that it's a big elephant in the room. Like, I even have the word woke muted on Twitter, and I think it's kind of just a catch-all term that's used to basically describe a number of different, sometimes even conflicting things. However, catchy title, got you to click, but I do want to give this as much thought and analysis as possible. I've seen things I love like Watchmen being classed as woke, but I think it explored the topics it was analysing really well. I don't think something getting called woke means it's bad, and we often see these things where something gets labelled woke months before it's released that turns out to be really good. Prey! Even like House of the Dragon in season 1, that got labelled woke in the lead up to it and it was brilliant. There they actually brought race in really well and used it to highlight that Rhaenyra's kids were clearly not Velaryon. Whereas in the book, their dad was white, so there wasn't much of an argument. This helped to add legitimacy to Alicent's claims. So stuff like that I can defend all day. But then I see stuff get called woke, and it's hard to defend because it's clear that the studio just lazily did something so they could give themselves the pat on the back about how progressive they are. They'll push it in the marketing, say, look how amazing we are, but then there's never any discussion or effort to add any depth to it in the said product itself. Still though, we live in a weird world where with great followers comes great responsibility. Actors often blast their thoughts out immediately, and when you're attached to a project like Snow White, that can cause a lot of issues. Ethan and Maya Hawke have also came out recently and said that studios are casting based on Instagram followers. So we live in a world where a studio want that following, but if the actor says something wrong, then that following can turn sour. I think, right, if you actually set out to make Snow White controversial, you'd actually struggle to make it as controversial as it is now. And it's insane seeing this as a movie reviewer because, again, it's Snow White, little cartoon animals and witches. It shouldn't be controversial. I think the main issue comes down to the fact that we live in a world now where everyone's extremely reactive. Anyone can post their thoughts out instantly and anyone can react to it as well. It's also important to know that even in small amounts, that a handful of people can seem like a lot. For example, if a studio or an actor says something controversial, you can get hundreds and hundreds of replies. Reading these, when I've seen someone getting cancelled, I've often thought, sheesh, a lot of people going in on this person. However, in the grand scheme of things, it might just be 100 people, but when you're scrolling through the replies, it takes a while, it can seem like a lot. But it still might just be 100 people. Because of this though, it can force those getting the reactions to react and then do something that might not be that smart. Hollywood has a habit of overcorrecting, and they'll often do things that don't even really make sense to try and stop a small group of people from being offended. Now Peter Dinklage, he came out and said that he found the idea of a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs remake a bit tone deaf, and thus Disney reacted. However, because the dwarves were seen as still being offensive, they couldn't cast actual little people in the role. So they went with some CGI dwarves that look like they come from the uncanny valley. What we're left with though is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where you can't cast 7 dwarves in case it causes offense. Disney also went through a massive period for decades where all of their princesses were white. I know there's a lot, of reactions around race swapping and diversity, but yeah, I think you could quite easily make an argument that Hollywood would often predominantly have white casts in the past. And look, I grew up in the 90s, so I still saw Will Smith having a massive career in Men in Black, Independence Day, and so on. The Matrix, looking back, that had a really diverse cast, and I never really thought about it too much. However, when the push for diversity really came to the forefront and Hollywood was just patting themselves on the back for doing something they should have been doing all along, Disney really started rethinking things. However, the issue is, they're so creatively bankrupt that they'd rather just race swap a successful character than create a brand new one. This was something that was seen across the board, and pretty much every franchise took the chance to push for more diversity. Which is fair enough, but if every single franchise is doing it, it's going to seem like a lot and people are going to be like, what's going on? What's happening? I think what the biggest downfall overall is that they weren't really giving new characters a chance or even creating them, and instead they were just being lazy and swapping old ones. We've even ended up at a point where like Amazon are having to come out and say, James Bond should be British and male. Like, yeah, no shit, mate. All the hundreds of books, comics, computer games, films where he's been portrayed as a British male, it's crazy you even have to come out and clarify that that is the character. Like, if he's not a British male, then he's not James Bond, is he? He's some other dickhead. However, again, Hollywood like to overcorrect, so we get these stupid debates where people question whether we should get Jane Bond or something. I think Daniel Craig's been asked it to death, and he's always said Hollywood should focus on making a unique female spy instead of trying to swap James Bond, which I completely agree with. Gillian Anderson actually came out and threw her hat in the ring to play the character, but like, you're not James Bond, mate. On the flip side of this, like, I'd never call for Dana Scully to be gender swapped to be a man. Instead, I'd just be like, make Agent Doggett or bring back Mulder. Now, I don't really have a massive issue with race swapping, and I think you can get some really good results from it. Nick Fury, Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, Jeffrey Wright as Felix Leiter, and hell, even Will Smith as James West in Wild Wild West. They all did well, however, I don't think that people who want to see the characters stay the race they know them as from hundreds of incarnations are also instantly racist because they don't want to see it changed. I know people often throw in the Ryan Gosling Black Panther meme, but being black is part of the character's makeup, being Wakandan's part of his DNA, and Wakanda, though it's a fictional country, it is located in Africa. So that always kind of just struck me as stupid, but I do think there are good examples on the flip side of this. I think characters like Blade and Spawn, they should always be played by black actors, and though race isn't critical to the character, that's just what you imagine in your head, and that's who we fell in love with when we read those comics and watched those films. And make a Spawn movie, please. I don't know why the character's still sitting around doing nothing. Coolest design ever. However, again, Hollywood has a habit of overcorrecting, so we end up with things like real-life figure Anne Boleyn being played by Jodie Turner-Smith. Identity politics, I think in general, are a weird thing, and you should always be, let's say, skeptical when a corporation seems to push something. We've all seen how they lampoon on it in The Boys, but I think it's obvious there is some truth to it. You can totally tell by the way that Disney have been downplaying and cancel their more diverse aspects since Trump got in power that they never really cared in the first place. Now, side tangent, corporations got into these identity politics because they believed it would generate revenue. Like, we all have personal values that we hold dear to ourselves that make us us. Corporations don't really have any values beyond they want to make money. They don't have a soul. However, if they push and promote something that seems personal to you, it makes you gain a personal attachment to them. If Disney come out and say they love mediocre YouTubers who wear polo shirts, I'm gonna have an attachment to that and be like, yes, I will support you. So why companies do it? Because it makes you gain a sense of loyalty and you're more likely to buy. Like, on the flip side of this, if you look at boycotts, it's often done because of politics, and therefore using that mind state, people will buy things if they support their politics, even if they're just saying it and don't really mean it. I think Steve Jobs said, you don't buy things, you buy feelings. This junk around me, I bought a lot of this stuff because it makes me feel a certain way. Companies tap into this and they wanted to open up their markets and appeal to more races, genders and beliefs. So they started really pushing identity politics, and I can see why they did that if they were trying to make money. However, they cast Rachel Zegler as a character who has always been known as having skin as white as snow. So what we're left with is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where you can't cast seven dwarves in case it causes offense, and a Snow White who isn't white. On top of this, we have a push for women to not be longing for men to come and save them, and a push for them to be represented as being more independent. So the song One Day My Prince Will Come is no longer on the soundtrack. Like, One Day My Prince Will Come, one of the most famous songs from Snow White, Can't use it. On top of this, it's also problematic for women to be judged on their looks, so they've had to change why the Queen's jealous of Snow White. Instead of being the fairest of them all, she now has to be the most brave and true or whatever. So what we're left with is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that can't have seven dwarfs, Snow White who isn't white, reliant on men, and not the fairest of them all. Due to overcorrecting, we've now hit a point where movies are so politically correct, it just ends up annoying everyone. It becomes the most made-by-committee movie ever, and thus has absolutely nothing to say. It's just exhausting because you can watch this stuff as an adult and see clearly what's been sanitized. It's like in Twisters when you found out they cut the kiss because they want to push more platonic relationships. But mate, like, I like seeing characters actually building an emotional connection to someone and have that pay off with a romantic gesture. You know, a kiss is pretty small in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to offend people, but it's just nice to have characters do it and show they're not just corporate-owned shells. Like, look at how kissing is used in Severance. These are corporate characters, and to see them do something emotional, it's nice, it builds them. It just makes the characters feel like they're actual characters and not these sanitized, we must have a platonic robotic relationship. Now, I also had a sort of similar issue with Captain America 4, where you're making a political thriller, but you're scared of saying anything political. So what you're left with is a film that doesn't have any of the depth or nuance that The Winter Soldier had, being pushed as being a political thriller. Hell, even the Batman, that's like leaps and bounds above it with its political message. And it's not pushing itself as a political thriller. Now, when crafting the movie, they should have just gone, can we actually make this movie in 2025? I think once you start running into all the things you're scared to touch upon, that it just hits a point you probably should realize it's just going to cause too many issues. Like, someone should have sat down and said, we're remaking Snow White, but we can't do this, and can't do this and this. You were so focused on seeing if you could remake it that you never stopped to think if you should. And someone should have just said, we probably shouldn't remake it then. However, again, Hollywood so creatively bankrupt that they would rather put out this shit than actually take a crack at something new. Some of these live action remakes, you know, they've made a lot of money, so Disney want to make easy money remaking what they know has worked, but they also don't want the fallout from what's aged badly. They're also happy to let their cast take the hit rather than having the higher-ups take the blame. Now, while the product itself's being overly sanitized, we have the flip side where the actors leading the projects are saying all kinds of shit. They don't care who they offend and will blur out anything. It makes it even more hilarious when you have them then have to go backpedal and apologize after a PR rep clearly got in touch. Like, on a side note, I know a couple of PR reps in Hollywood, and there's been a few times where I've just got a text from one saying, fuck's sake. Now, I'll then go online and instantly see what they're referring to, and it'll often be an actor putting their foot in it. It makes movies really difficult to promote because at any time, actors can say something controversial. And hell, like, I remember being in my 20s. You finally find your voice after being withdrawn throughout most of your teenage years, and you want to get your voice out there and show how wise you are, but you also don't have the wisdom to know you're probably saying something stupid, which unfortunately happens more times than not, and we often see quite innocent things blown up to a massive scale. Now, I think life just constantly exists in this ever-ongoing pendulum swing. For example, in the 80s, you have everything being hit with censorship and completely toned down. Go to the 90s, and then you've got everything swinging the other way. That saw the birth of South Park, Eminem, Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, you know, all stuff that was pushing massive boundaries. These days, you don't really have any of those contemporaries, and it's all toned down. Like, even comedians run the risk of being cancelled, even though the nature of their job and what they're saying, it shouldn't be taken seriously. It's a joke, it's not to be taken serious. What you're getting though is the pendulum now swinging back and going wildly in the other direction, which is all just history repeating itself. And it will swing back the other way too. I've said to a couple of people, actually private, just be careful what you tweet now because you'll probably get fired for it in about 10 years time. Yay! But these things just happen culturally over and over and over again. So I think things will change in the industry and we'll see actors' social media accounts heavily managed if they sign up to a project that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Because yeah, once you factor in the reshoots with Snow White, I don't even think they're gonna make their money back based off the box office projections. I think that Hollywood might even go back to seeking out actors who keep themselves private. Scarlett Johansson, she recently talked about how Universal keep trying to get her to sign up to Instagram so she can help promote Jurassic World. However, you run the risk there of having everything we talked about. I think that movie studios from now on will just be like, look, we are paying you millions of dollars. Here is a list of things you can't talk about if you accept the job. If you do, and it financially damages the film's projections, we can sue you. I think in general, though, it's mental that a film that should be as middle of the road as Snow White is causing this many issues to the point you can't even have a press tour. This whole stuff's insane to me, and I know there's going to be people criticizing the fact that I'm even criticizing this stuff because it's difficult to debate these sort of topics when it's very easy to just lump someone in with a label. Like, I criticized Cap 4 and got called racist and told that I only seem to crap on projects with diverse casts. And this was in the same week I was working on a video saying how good Paradise was, which has a really diverse cast, and also like our 50th Tenet breakdown, which has a black lead. And I thought Ant-Man sucked, and Shazam too for that matter, and I've kind of went off comic book stuff because there's more bad than good. I think at some point though, you just have to say the Emperor's not wearing any clothes, and yeah, some of this stuff has been really mishandled. So what we have is Snow White, the film that birthed Disney, potentially destroying this phase of the company. But yeah, I just felt I had to talk about this and probably blew my own career up as well, but we have an hour-long Tenet breakdown to make up for it. Like I said, I'm keeping these kind of videos to a minimum and I'm just going to focus on Easter eggs and breakdowns, but yeah, it's difficult to also be a movie channel and not talk about the movie business. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you leave them below. We can have a polite discussion. And with that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. I've been your host, Paul. If you've not already left, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and you take care. Peace.